Hello, everyone. My name is Luis Valencia. I use he, him pronouns. I am a project manager at UC Berkeley Extension, and I will be your moderator for this session. I have the pleasure of welcoming everyone to Using AI Productively at Work, Home, and Job Hunting, presented by Jill Finlayson. Jill Finlayson is the managing director of the Citrus Innovation Hub, which features a workforce innovation program, visiting innovators program, and emerging tech programs. Jill formerly led the Edge in Technology Initiative at the University of California, which focuses on expanding diversity and gender equity in tech. Student-related activities at Citrus include the annual Edge in Tech Symposium, Startup Challenge Labs, and data discovery projects. She also co-leads a UC system-wide inclusive innovation and equitable entrepreneurship initiative. Jill hosts a Future of Work podcast and a Leaders in DEI speaker webinar series. Prior to Berkeley, she led mentorship and startup programs for Singularity University, the toys category at eBay, an online community for social entrepreneurs at the Skoll Foundation, marketing at Silicon Valley startups, and striking poverty at the World Bank. She has mentored global tech women, startup founders, and student innovators. Jill is a graduate of UC Berkeley. Go Bears. So with that, I'd like to welcome Jill.
Thank you so much. And I'm excited to talk with you all today because this is a really dynamic topic that we are in the right time and place to talk about. So I want to welcome everybody. I want to welcome my UC Berkeley folks, but I also want to welcome all the people from our other UC campuses. It's wonderful to have you join today. We are going to talk today about using generative AI productively at home, at work, and job hunting. And so I want to say, we should get a little lay of the land. So if you wouldn't mind in the chat dropping in a few phrases about how much experience you have with generative AI, e.g., I've never used it at all. I've used ChatGPT, or I use it more regularly. So if you could go ahead and drop some things in the chat, I will be reading along. And while you're dropping in some comments, I'm going to ask Louis. Louis, what's your experience with ChatGPT or with generative AI in general?
Mine is very limited, Jill, right now. So this is actually very great for me. I know it's becoming a little bit more popular, but I would not know how to use it.
Excellent. Well, I'm seeing a lot of never used, so that's fantastic. You're in the right place. And even if you have used it or used it in a number of different places, I think you're going to pick up some tips. I also encourage you to put some questions into the chat. And if you have suggestions or tips, we all learn from each other. This is all brand new and nascent, so it's a great time to kind of share information. You can also put questions in the Q&A if you prefer, but if you put it in the chat, other people may be able to help you out. So I wanted to start out by asking a couple of questions. And the first one here is going to be, what is the best part of your job? So go ahead, once again, throw it into the chat. What is the best part of your job? So for me, I work with a lot of students who are working on startups. I also get to create new things. Those are some of my favorite things. Louis, what's your favorite part of your job?
My favorite part of the job is working with students directly, so that interaction with students.
Absolutely. And I'm seeing student interaction also mentioned in the chat. Working with trainees, working one-on-one, collaborating in teams. Yeah, team projects are amazing. Solving people's technology problems, interacting with faculty. I'm seeing a lot of people, right? A lot of people in these answers. This is fantastic. And mentoring. Awesome. All right, now I got a follow-on question for you. What is the worst part of your job? And I'll kick this off as well. I really don't like doing expense reports. I find it aggravating. Louis, what about you?
I do not like working on budgets.
Ah, yes.
Budgets.
So let's throw in the chat here. We got admin tasks. Yep. Expense reports. Somebody else is in my camp there. What else do we have? Reports. Travel arrangements. Yes, that can be very aggravating. Repeated manual tasks. Again, perfect. You're in exactly the right place because here's my vision, right? Let's imagine a world where we can do less of the things that we don't like and more of the things that we do like. How can we be more productive and actually more creative, more happy, more excited? So what we're going to talk about today is AI, and I'm going to break it into sort of 4 sections. One, I'm going to sort of level set and give you some background and talk about a little bit about what artificial intelligence is and how we can use it. Then I want to go into each one of the blocks. I'm going to talk about using it for job hunting. I'm going to talk about using it at home. And then I'm going to circle back to talking about using it at work and how we can do that. So this is going to be the format. And at each section, I'll stop and do a live demo. Wish me luck. And then we'll take a couple of questions and then we'll go on to the next section. So I started out, like many people, just playing around with the AI. And do you see the chat, or is that not showing? I just want to make sure I'm not showing. You can see what I'm looking at.
We can't see the chat. You're good.
Okay, good. So here, my daughter was turning 27 this year. She lives in New York. She loves cats. She loves capybaras. She loves cute animals, and she lives in New York. And so I went to ChatGPT and I said, create a birthday card that says happy 27th birthday, and showed all of these different animals. And so you saw it flipped through a number of different versions. So I ended up sending this animated gift to my daughter for her birthday card. I also started playing around with it. We wanted to create a little lending library at Citrus, and I wanted to create kind of an old-fashioned, a little bit steampunk-looking library plate that we could put on the books in the library. And so I used the ChatGPT to generate the image, and then I modified it in Photoshop with our logo. So I played with it, right? That's how I got started. The next thing I did was I played with it at work, right? So we all have to try different things. And so the first thing was, of course, I used it to create a lot of images. And as you will see in this presentation, almost every image was generated by ChatGPT. DALL-E is the tool that I used. So I continued to do that, but I started to experiment with a couple other things. We had an offsite where we talked about strategy and vision. And part of that activity was we looked at how might we define our vision and our goals, our purpose, how we're participating, what should we be prioritizing? So we asked people to write down what is our mission and vision. And so they wrote down a bunch of answers, and then we asked them to do it a second time. And they wrote down a bunch of answers. And within seconds, ChatGPT was able to distill 4 themes that ran across all the answers, and it was even able to compare the first versions people submitted with the second versions people submitted. So it was so fast and it was so easy, and it was able to give us really actionable information. So that's why it's really fun to start playing around with these things both at home and at work. So let's talk about what is ChatGPT. ChatGPT is a generative AI, and I'm going to speak more broadly about generative AI. What I'm going to say is artificial intelligence has been around for a long time. Machine learning, which is an ingredient, if you will, of artificial intelligence, has been around for a long time. We've been automating machinery and things for a long time. But what happened about a year and a half ago was generative AI came on the scene, and it was very easy for everyone to use, and it really woke people up to what was happening. So for the purposes of this conversation today, I'm just going to talk about generative AI. I'm not going to talk about all of the other aspects of artificial intelligence. I just want to talk about generative AI and how you might be able to use that. So as a foundation, generative AI, as you might imagine, generates. It creates things. It creates things that didn't exist before. You can say, ChatGPT, create a story about 2 mice for a 5-year-old. You can say, create a picture, like this picture on the left here, that shows a machine generating a rainbow, and it'll create something that hasn't existed before. And this is great if that's what you're expecting, if you're expecting it to make things up. But if you're expecting facts, that's a little bit different, right? So if you are trying to create something that hasn't existed, it's a feature. If you're trying to create something that's very factual and based in truth, it is a bug. And then you have to put in some guidance for the system so that it only tells the truth. What it is actually doing, and this is important to understand, is generative AI isn't an entity that is a smart force. It's a predictive tool. It is literally predicting what the next word is going to be. And the reason it's so good at it is it has a huge amount of data to train on. And so when you ask it a question, it's giving you an answer, and each word in that answer was based on what was likely to be the next word for similar types of answers. So it's literally a pattern predictive tool. It's predicting what's likely to be the next word. So you can limit it. You can say, hey, when I ask, a AI a question, I want it to only tell me the truth or only pull information from certain files or certain documents. You can do that, and it will provide more factual information, but then you're losing some of the benefits of the ability to generate new things. So it's really about understanding your purpose and use for using the generative AI. So how is it similar or different to a Google search? And I'm going to take a little sidebar here and talk a little bit about that coffee cup in the corner. Why did I put a coffee cup on this page? Well, it turns out that if you do a Google search, that takes about the amount of energy it takes to create a cup of coffee. It turns out it's 0.0003 kilowatts to create that cup of coffee. A ChatGPT search takes 1,000 times that amount of energy, 0.3 kilowatts, and it actually would be like making 1,000 cups of coffee. So sidebar here, this has real environmental, energy, and sustainability concerns, and we need to be aware of this as people shift their searches from a Google search to a ChatGPT search. So we won't go into climate and energy at all, but I wanted to give you that quick sidebar. So what a Google search does when you go originally and you go and search for an answer on Google, it was looking for websites that had the type of information that you were looking for. Again, keywords and matching. And it had certain ways of prioritizing websites that were more credible, like universities, and helping to surface better quality. But it was really up to you, right, to decide if that website was credible, if you approved of the content that it was bringing up. So similarly, when you get to using ChatGPT, you still have to use those critical thinking skills to assess, is this content accurate? Is it good? The second thing that you saw when you went to doing a Google search is sponsored results. And this is really important to remember as well, because Google is not a public good. This isn't a government agency. This is a private company that is trying to make money, and they want to get clicks. And so they are prioritizing things that are going to generate revenue for them. So I think that's really important to understand, because a lot of times people think that Google is this really, public service, and it is not. The third thing that you now see when you do a Google search is you'll actually start to see an answer. And that's generative AI coming into play. They're trying to guess what the answer is that you're looking for, so you don't even have to go to the website. So it's really important to think about, Google is searching content on the web, and it's helping to surface the most relevant content. A ChatGPT is predicting the answer that you want from learning and reading all of these websites. Does that make sense? I'm just going to take a look at people. Yeah, in the chat, are we following? Does this make sense? Taking a look here. Sort of. Yes, sort of. Okay. All right. So I think it's important to differentiate because they seem sort of similar. You ask a lot of questions of Google search, you're asking questions of ChatGPT, but they are different animals. All right, let's go on to the next one. Another thing that you'll hear is that people say it's not good, right? It's not good quality, or it's not factual, or it's not giving the information that you're looking for. And I will say this, that's possibly true. Right now, it is a new service. It is the most nascent that it will ever be. It is the worst that it will ever be. And so it's only going to get better from here. So what does that mean? It means that you should be starting to use these tools now, because once they're useful, once they're very efficient, then you want to be already aware of how to use them and be using them efficiently and effectively, because that's going to give you a competitive edge in the workplace. And so part of this is putting up with a little bit of non-optimal performance while you're learning, but it's also teaching you right? About what are the limits of the AI? What can it do? What is it not good at? For example, I've asked it to create images of women, and it will default to some biased standards. Oftentimes, there will be deep cleavage, or they'll be wearing high heels, or they'll be thin. So it's trained on a bunch of data sets that can skew the results. It also has a lot of trouble with hands and fingers. If you ask for it to create images with hands, oftentimes they'll have 6 or 7 fingers, but that's now. That's right now. And we're going to see this changing and improving extremely fast, extremely fast. So let's talk a little bit about the weird data that the AI is trained on. It is predominantly Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. It's also very white and male. And this comes from the origins of the internet and who was on the internet, whose pictures and photos were on the internet. There's something called Faces in the Wild, and it was something like 80% white men. So when it was used to train technology, it didn't do very well on women. It didn't do very well on people of color. So we have to be aware of the biases that are in the data sets, and then we have to mitigate for the biases that are in these data sets because they're being used to train the data and the algorithms. So I'm not going to do a talk about bias in AI. There's a lot to be said. There's a lot to be said about bias in AI, and there's as much peril as there is promise, but this is a glass half full class, and we're going to focus on the good parts of AI and the potential of what it can do. But before I jump into that, I do want you to be aware of these issues, because when people use data to train these algorithms, they are using data, and it could be collected for a different purpose and then being misapplied. It might be poorly cleaned, or they don't mitigate for the bias in the data set. For example, Amazon tried to create a tool to do recruiting, and because the majority of the people in their data set were male, it found those patterns and it started penalizing people who played softball, but not people who played baseball. And they couldn't get the bias out of the system, so they basically scrubbed the whole thing. So how the data set is developed, how it is mitigating for bias, how it's even labeled, who's labeling it, can all affect how well the algorithm functions. And then how the algorithm is built can be biased as well. What is the purpose of it? Where is it being used? How are we evaluating it? Because the data sets are going to continuously change, so we need to monitor to be able to see what's happening. And then finally, I want to point out, it's also how it's used. And we're going to talk about HR and AI and how it's used, who gets to go around it. If it's filtering resumes, the people with power and privilege can get a referral and not even go through those filters. So these are all big issues, and there's a whole nother talk to be had here. And there are solutions for this. And the good news is that we can improve algorithms. When we find problems, we can change them. And so having a human in the loop is really important. So when we're developing these data, we need a validation by a human. We need to correct the model by a human. We need to validate the output by a human. And so when you're using AI, you have to be that human in the loop. So what does that mean? This is much more machine teaching. You might have heard of machine learning. This is much more machine teaching. We're teaching it what we want, what we expect, what our standards are. So you have to be the fact checker. You have to be the bias detector. You have to put the guardrails in to say, I don't want things that are not factual. You have to instruct it step by step to do the things in the way that you want it to do to get the outcomes that you want. And then you have to tell it what is the personality that you want to have, what is the tone that you want to have. So this is your role in this process. And what we do know is that by broad strokes, a lot of people are already using this at home. So even if your company or the university hadn't, which they have, they've given you permission to use ChatGPT and generative AI, but if they hadn't, people are still using it, and they call it the shadow IT, because rather than your formal IT department, they're just going ahead and using these tools at home and on their own devices. So if people are going to use it, we need to ensure that they're using it well, that they're using it correctly. And so we need to provide not only guidance, but what I would call an enabling environment, right? We need to give them the information they need, but also examples. So Berkeley has done this, and there are a couple of things that you can look at here. If you go to technology.berkeley.edu/AI, you'll get a whole page of resources. If you go to this site here of the Berkeley Office of Ethics, you get information about the appropriate use of ChatGPT and similar AI tools. And it's worth taking a look at this, and I'm going to oversimplify for the purposes of our conversation and say, you only want to use publicly available information in the ChatGPT tools. Obviously, never any student information, any private information, proprietary information. And you don't want to use those in the AI because anything you put in a public API or a public AI tool is used then to train other models. So it's public, it gets absorbed into the larger ecosystem. So be very careful about what you put into the system. And it's important to think about this through a couple of lenses. What do you get for the free model? What do you get for the paid model? And what do you get for the enterprise model? And I'll say a bit more about that as well. But Berkeley has been very proactive about this, and I'm really excited. They put together a working group that developed this guide, which is recommendations to guide the University of California's artificial intelligence strategy. So this was advice on what questions to ask vendors if you're going to use a solution that has AI in it. It has what to do if you're developing new AI. So creating guidance and rule and information about not only what is being done, but giving people examples of how to use it. What are some good use cases, not just when not to use it. So the difference between the free, the paid, and the enterprise. The free version of like ChatGPT, for example, is going to be an earlier version, a more public model. It won't be as good as the paid model. It won't have as much memory of your prior requests, and it is just less good. When I first started this, I would create some images, and some of them were very scary looking images. They've gotten a lot better. And like I said, this is changing so very quickly, but it's not as good as the paid. The paid version is going to be a higher quality. So that's sort of the difference between the free and the paid, is just the quality of the outcomes and the outputs in the reports. There are enterprise versions, and in fact, they are launching an education version, which is an enterprise version for education institutions. At this point in time, and this is to the best of my knowledge, because I have talked with the folks in the IT, there are no enterprise license for the University of California or for Berkeley. So you would be out there talking to purchasing it on your own, and you would have to negotiate sort of per user or per query type pricing. So I don't have any pricing for you on this, but I'm imagining in the not too distant future, there will be more information forthcoming on this. But the reason I bring up enterprise is then if you have to want to use private information, proprietary information, if you do that in an enterprise version, then it is not shared with the other machine learning. It is not used to train other AIs. So it is your instance, if you will, of that AI. So that is the value of enterprise, is that's when you can put more private information in and make something more custom for you. So we are here. There literally are new AI companies coming out every single minute. We are at a very specific point in time. You do not need to try them all. In fact, I have not tried the majority of the ones that are in this presentation, but I wanted to give you a view into what was happening out there. But what I do want you to do is be curious and to play. Play with at least one or two of these tools. Pick the one that's most valuable to you. So when we talked at the beginning, you said, these are the parts of my job I don't like. So look for tools that will help you reduce or automate the parts of your job that you don't enjoy. Hey, Lewis, are there any interesting things in the chat I should be aware of?
No, there are a couple of questions. They were asking about what program you used for that the card you made your daughter, or the card you made your daughter, and if it's accessible at Cal.
Excellent. Yes, I use the ChatGPT OpenAI. I'm paying the $19.95 a month for the paid version, but the ChatGPT 3 version will do quite well. And what I did was I downloaded each image that it created, and then I went to a free GIF maker and I uploaded all of the images to create the GIF. What was the other question?
There's a question about the delimit of data in order to reduce bias. Are there ways
Yeah,
to delimit
I'm going to
data?
pass on that one for now, just because that is a huge conversation. I would love to talk more about it. Let's take it offline. All right. So we used to say there's an app for that, right? We used to be, oh, I'll just download an app for that. Now you can literally say the same thing for AI. There's an AI for that. And so when we start to talk about use cases for how to use AI, there are a lot of them, but one of the big ones is writing and text generation. So you can go to OpenAI or Anthropic or Perplexity AI or Gemini, and you can say, hey, write me a draft letter, put a template together, make a list, write a poem. You can do any one of these things on these different sites. Now, I would say ChatGPT from OpenAI is kind of your workhorse. It really has been around. It does a lot of work. It is very effective. Anthropic's Claude AI is supposed to be a little more ethical, a little more understandable, a little more conversational. So it's worth kind of trying both of them and seeing the difference. Perplexity AI is got one really distinguishing characteristic. Now, we talked a little bit about the fact that AI can make things up. So Perplexity will answer your question and it will give you citations. It will tell you where they got that fact from. So if you want to have a fact-based result, Perplexity AI will actually link you to where they got that source information. And Gemini is the Google one, and they have a lot of different languages. So I'll pause here for a second and say, how many of you have used Grammarly, right? That one has been around for quite a while. It's embedded in a lot of the things that we use. Do you think Grammarly is cheating, right? Is it? It's correcting your spelling. It's correcting your grammar. Is that cheating? These are the questions that we're going to be facing kind of going forward with generative AI. Is using generative AI cheating? Or is it expected that you're going to use all the tools at your disposal? All right, so writing and text generation, that's your first port of call. The second one, as we've talked about a lot, is image and art creation. So I use OpenAI DALL-E, and it's been really great, and I've been able to do a lot of different things. I often find, and this is just my experience, my first query, my first request for an image is often the best one. And then if I try to modify it, which you can, it tends to get worse. So you want to come up with a really clear request, and we'll talk more about how to ask good questions of ChatGPT in a minute. Midjourney, I've heard wonderful things about. People love Midjourney. It's supposed to create really high quality images used in a lot of creative industries. And there are others, Deep AI, Artbreeder. And again, these are just a sampling. There are so many of these out there. You can create music. And when we finish this section, I'm going to give you a demo of Suno AI. You can tell it, I want to do a certain type of song about a certain topic in a certain genre, and it will, in seconds, create that song for you. And these are a number of the different ones that are being used. And some of these are even being used by artists. Elon Musk's girlfriend, I can't remember her name, it escapes me right now, is actually collaborating with AI. And she says people can generate songs that are like her style as long as she gets money basically from it. And then she can actually use this for ideation. It's quite interesting. I'm seeing some questions about AI in schools. We'll talk about that in a little bit. All right, coding. So here's a question that people ask. Should I even bother learning coding anymore if AI can write code better than people? And the answer is yes. You still need to be able to write code, but using an AI tool can help you write code faster. It can help you write documentation. It can help you look for bugs in your code. It can help you troubleshoot. Like, I need to figure out how to write a section of code to do X or Y. My husband has been using the Copilot for a while now, and when it first came out, he was like, it's way more trouble than it's worth. I could write the code from scratch faster, but increasingly that's not the case, and he has continued to use it, which is, again, why you have to start using it right now. Good news about this is we have a UC Berkeley license for GitHub, and that includes the Copilot. So if you log into GitHub with your UC Berkeley ID, you will get the Copilot. You can even generate videos, animations, all different ways that you can deliver educational content. Maybe it's an onboarding tool, maybe it's a informational video. All sorts of things like that can be generated. And similarly, they can create voice and speech synthesis. If you wanted to do your own podcast, now you can create different voices, you can create music, and you can build all of these things into the things that you want to create. So I really see it as a partner in developing creativity. And there's more. There's so much more. I want to give a few examples, but just know I gave you a bunch of common use cases. There's a lot of very narrow and specific use cases for different AIs. So Otter AI got its grounding in writing transcripts, creating automated summaries, developing lists, action items from meetings. And the good news here is we have Zoom as a contract at UC, and they are updating it now to the Zoom that has the AI. It's called AI Companion for Zoom, and it is actually powered by Otter AI. So there should be no reason why somebody has to take minutes during a meeting. We should absolutely be having these transcript services do that for us, summarize it. We have a single source of truth. It's an excellent way to go. Another one that came out was a company called Crystal Knows, and it actually is a plugin for LinkedIn. So if you are in business development or sales, what Crystal Knows will analyze the person that you want to speak with and tell you, does this person want to have big picture first, or do they want to be walked through all the steps? And they do this by looking at their LinkedIn profile and other information on the web. Knowledge management. Now, this, I think, is a huge opportunity for UC. We all have a lot of documents in different places, in Google Drives, and it's really hard to find that one thing that you want to have. And so what a retrieval augmented generation can do is you basically say, here are all these files and documents. It can even be files, documents, Slack messages, emails. It can take all of these things and make them searchable and then give you that natural language chat GPT type interface. Like, find me the document that says X, or what is the answer to this question based on our rules and guidelines. So for me, I think this is a huge opportunity. It is one that requires a little bit more technical expertise, and I'll give you an example of what I'm trying to do as we get to the work section. A lot of us have used Zapier, which does a lot of integrations with mailing and email and embedding surveys. They now have their own chatbot. And this is a really important one down on the bottom, which is Wolfram Alpha. Now, for whatever reason, how AI is learning and taught, it is very bad at math. It is just not an effective tool to do calculations, with the exception of Wolfram Alpha, which has been around for quite a while and is really designed for math and science. So if you want to do calculations, analysis, that is your tool for you. So before we take a quick break for questions, I want to tell you, how do you interface with all of these tools? And the way you interface is with talking to them, right? It's conversation. You're like, I would like you to tell me this. And so we ask them a question, and we ask the ChatGPT to tell us an answer. But there are better ways to ask better questions. So I'm going to give you a few tips here. The first is to think about the role. Now, this was a shocker to me. My husband came home and he said, hey, did you know I can tell ChatGPT or, the GitHub Copilot that I'm an expert at Python coding, and it'll give me a different answer than if I just ask the question without telling it I'm an expert. And so you can actually, if you just ask a question, you're going to get a generic answer. But if you tell the ChatGPT, I'm an expert in this, it's going to give you a different answer. The second part of your question or your request has to include instructions. What do you want it to do? And I've got a picture of a teacher with a child sitting next to them. It's very much that relationship. If you were going to instruct your student or you were going to instruct an employee, this is the instruction. This is what I want you to do. And you might want to break down the steps. Do this first, do this second, or look at this, refer to this document. So you're going to give it actually the steps and sometimes even the materials to look at. And then you want to tell it the end goal. This is what I want to see at the end. I want to see a short paragraph. I want to see a 10-page paper. I want to see 3 bullets. I want to see a prioritized list. So you want to give it what is the thing, the deliverable that you want to have at the end. And then, as we talked about, you might want to narrow it down, right? You might want to say, use only facts or restrict it to this sector. So this way you're getting a more specific answer. And I personally really like asking for lists. I would say, give me the top 5 reasons. Give me a prioritized list. And the other thing is when it gives you an answer, you can say, make it shorter, make it friendlier. You can give it information back to modify the result. So let me escape from this, and I'm going to jump over here. And I'm going to show you an example of this. So let us come over here. And we're going to actually look at this one. So here we are in ChatGPT, and I asked it, how do bees make honey? All right. And it says, well, okay, nectar collection, nectar transportation, processing, storage, evaporation, capping the honey. Okay, let's try a different one. I'm 5 years old. How do bees make honey? Now it's going to speak in more simple terms. Oh, bees fly to the flower and drink a sweet juice called nectar, right? So it's rewriting it. Same question, different context. Then down here, I'm an apiculturist, which is a beekeeper, right? And I said, tell me, how do we make honey, right? And now we get things like enzymic conversion, nectar dehydration, and these ripening and these sort of things. So it's a very different answer. So that's my example. So let's take some questions. Lewis, what are you seeing?
Quick question about all of the programs you mentioned. Do you know if there's fees to some are free, which ones are accessible?
Yeah, most of them that I've played around with have had a very simple free version. It may be very limited, but it gives you enough to play around with it. If you want to use them, in a more professional capacity, I think a lot of them do charge a monthly fee. Some of them, it depends on, if you get a licensed number of users. But in general, they have a very entry-level free version, has been my experience.
Other than that, there's no more questions, but if anyone wants to or has still a question, there's time right now.
Any questions just on the basics? Because now the next thing we're going to go into is the job, because I see best practices for matching resume to job posting and cover letter creation. So we're going to talk about that next. But any questions about the stuff we've covered so far? Christina, I'm not sure what final round AI is. Maybe you can say a little bit more about that. I like Miranda. I 100% agree with AI helping with minutes. Never want to do that again. Absolutely. Right? Fantastic. Well, with that then, let's see. Privacy concerns using generative AI. Yes, I think there is a lot to be said about security, privacy, and people should be building security and privacy into these tools up front. But if you're using the public free tools, there probably is not a lot of privacy. Pretty much everything you put in there is going to be used to train other systems. All right. Well, let me go ahead and jump back into the presentation. There we go. All right. So why should we be thinking about HR and jobs? Why should we even pay attention to AI? Will it replace all of our jobs? Do more jobs require AI? So in reverse order, yes, more and more jobs are going to be requiring AI, or at least people to be aware of and be comfortable with how these tools are used. Will it replace your job? Not likely. What we're seeing is it's going to change jobs, and it's going to change everyone's job. It used to be, AI was going to change blue-collar jobs, but now it's going to change green-collar jobs, white-collar jobs. Every collar job is going to be different in the age of AI. And the reason we should pay attention to AI and HR is equity. And that's actually what got me started on this, because I'm like, hold on, these AI tools are deciding who gets an interview. And so I started looking at this, and I got both very concerned, but also started learning quite a lot. So AI is determining who even sees a job listing. So AI will say, you say, I want to show this to everybody, but you click optimize for clicks, and suddenly it's only going to show it to certain people. Women are less likely to be shown high-paying jobs. Men are more likely to be shown driving jobs. So if you click optimize, it falls into a lot of patterns and learned behavior, and all of our strides toward removing those kind of biases get lost. And so it's a very real concern. Now, again, there are opportunities for AI to address bias and be more intentional about inclusion. You can use AI to apply for a job at a single click. So really automating efficiency, because how painful and annoying is it to fill out a job form and rearrange your resume to fit into somebody else's form? That's a lot of unnecessary work. So they've automated this. If you go to LinkedIn, you can apply for a job with a single click. But automating that efficiency for you has meant that now the recruiters are getting hundreds of resumes within the first 24 hours. So now they're faced with a problem. AI is being used to screen and filter. And so this can be good or it could be bad. If it's screening on certain skills and finding people who are qualified to do the job, that's actually a great service. But if it's screening out people who meet 90% of the requirements, that might be a problem. And the other issue here is we have very poorly written job descriptions. And if the criteria is bad, then the filtering automatically is going to be bad. Some companies are turning away from even using resumes, and they're doing AI run testing. So they're testing your coding skills, or they're testing different capacities, right? Competencies. And so AI is running these. It has the upside of it's equitable, because everybody has the same experience, but who defined the skills? Who defined what success looks like? There are even some of these tools that are automating interviews. So instead of you speaking to a person, your first interview might be with AI. Again, the upside is you'll be asked the same questions in the same way as everyone else, but you're interfacing with a computer. You don't have somebody to react to, and that can be very awkward and difficult. AI is even setting salaries, determining what people are going to get. Now, that can be beneficial because we can see our salary ranges, but it can also be ridiculous. Like they'll set a salary range that's like 200 to 200,000, and that's not going to help anyone. But when we talk about being able to find this out, there are websites you can go to and get a prediction of what is a salary in that location for that job title likely to be. And I think that's super helpful. AI is also predicting your potential and attrition. So if you haven't gotten a raise or changed jobs in a few years, you might be at risk of leaving. And if they tell your employer, then maybe they can come talk to you about what are your professional development goals? How might we retain you? Because once somebody makes a decision to leave a company, they're not likely to stay. And this has become a real obstacle for our students who are graduating. A lot of them are finding it really hard to get a job. I don't know if you've experienced that, but a number of my students have been really struggling. So this has kind of turned into this arm race, because now that you can apply so easily, the recruiters get too many job applications. You have to apply for more and more jobs to get even one offer. And the system has kind of rendered it inefficient. People who are great fits for 90% of the job are just screened out. Meanwhile, you don't know, right? You don't know why you're being screened out. You don't know if there's bias at play. You don't know if you're missing a skill. All you know is that you're not making it through the process. And the other thing that they're then trying to do is say, okay, we've got all of these candidates coming in. How do we narrow the pool? even more. And so one of the things that they've started to do is add more requirements, right? Add more filters to get the number down. And what this ends up being is the purple squirrel. They're looking for somebody who just doesn't exist. Somebody who has 7 years of cybersecurity experience when they only need 2 years of cybersecurity experience. It really is a struggle, especially for the new graduates who entry-level job descriptions, entry-level require 3 years of experience. This is a problem. And then I was even talking with some recruiters, and they were saying, well, it's worse than that, because why would employers hire a new graduate when they could actually, using AI, find people who are currently employed doing similar jobs and invite them to come apply with several years of experience? So they're doing very targeted outreach to collect people who aren't even on the job market looking. So this has had a very notable impact of returning to kind of an old days problem. If you can't get through the filters, you have to get through a personal referral. So you have to network. And I have a big problem with this because people who come from wealthier or more urban settings have much bigger networks than people who are first generation or come from another country or come from outside of a urban area. It makes it much more difficult to get a job. But I will say this, AI can help. So if you go to LinkedIn, you can look for people who have studied at the same school as you, who have similar experience. You can go to the company that you want to work for and look for employees there that have similar backgrounds or values to you that you could reach out to and connect. They also can recommend clubs, events, organizations that you can go to where you can meet more people, which will increase your odds of getting that very needed referral. You can also improve your application process. So these are actual screenshots. I looked to apply for a computer science job, and it points out that I was missing a few requirements: back-end web development, C programming, etc. But do you notice the little plus add sign? If I actually had those skills and I just hadn't put them on my resume, it would allow me to very quickly add them. Similarly, on the right side, it's actually looking at a job and it's saying, hey, here are 5 skills missing from your profile. And again, giving you the opportunity to add them. Once you've found jobs that you're qualified for and interested in, LinkedIn will be more than happy to send you jobs that they think you would be a great match for. This is all happening with AI. And in fact, LinkedIn has really moved to a skills-based model, which is why you're seeing a lot of these questions about skills. And you need to now make sure that you've optimized your LinkedIn to talk about the skills that you have, because that's what the AI is driving on. You can use AI to improve your headshots. So this is you in different clothes. This is you in the multiverse. This is kind of fun to play with. I'm not sure I'm on board with this. It's not as authentic, but it's a great way to get a professional headshot without going out and buying new clothes. But there are some really weird ones. If you look at the lower right, there's this person's neck is like stretched like this. Very strange, but these are tools that you can very easily use. You can practice interviewing by interviewing with an AI and have these experiences. Madeline, question. I'll ask you to unmute. Yeah.
I'm so sorry I did that by mistake.
Oh, no worries, no worries.
AI to help me with this.
But no worries. If people have questions, please do just jump in. Yeah, no, this is a great thing to do, because if you practice interviewing, a couple of things will happen. One, you'll get used to the types of questions that are asked. You'll be able to practice your answers, and you'll just be a little less stressed when you go to the interview because you've had a mock interview and you've asked. You can even just go to ChatGPT and say, what are the top 5 questions for a job, this role at this company? And it's going to give you some really valuable and actionable information. And you can draft cover letters. And let me pause here for a moment to say, I've talked to a lot of recruiters. None of them look at cover letters, which makes me cry, because I think a good cover letter is amazing. I love good cover letters. I look for it when I'm hiring, but the recruiters do not. However, I will caveat that to say, if you make it through to the interviews, then the hiring managers may look at it, or the interview people may look at it. So there is a place for these cover letters, and you can work with AI to draft that cover letter. You can provide it with the information to write a good first draft. So you can say, I'm providing my resume, and here's the job I'm applying for. Here's the job description and the requirements. Please write a cover letter that matches my skills to the job, and you can give it feedback. You can say, here's the company mission and vision. Here are some of my key achievements. Here are some keywords that I would love for you to emphasize. And you can actually optimize your resume as well, not only through LinkedIn, but through other services. So you can really customize not just your cover letter, but your resume for the job that you're applying for. But along with this, you have to give it a real guidance, right? You have to give it real instructions. So you can request that it proofread and grammar check. You can ask it to add greater specificity about the job or the industry. You can ask it to make the tone different, more formal, more friendly, more casual. You can ask it to restructure your letter. So you write a draft and you submit it to, ChatGPT, make my letter better, a stronger opening, a stronger closing. How might I personalize this? Here's a personal story I want you to integrate. So AI can really do a really nice place to get you started. And I will say, we just had to create a job description, and I went in and I just sort of did like a mind dump of like, these are all the things that this person needs to do and the skills that they need to have. And I had ChatGPT generate the first version of the job description. And then, of course, I did a human moderation to make sure it was what I wanted it to be. So that's the important part here. If you're going to use AI to do these things, I'm going to say, if you don't modify it, it's going to be pretty obvious that you used AI to write this. And that may be a disqualifying thing for people looking at it. They may very clearly go, this person used the word mosaic. Only AI uses the word mosaic, right? So there are certain triggers that are going to tip people off, just the way it's written or the tone. So don't over-rely on your AI-generated draft. Make sure that you're checking for inaccurate or outdated information. Fact-check it yourself. Make sure your voice is there, that your personality is there. At least change like the first sentence and the last sentence, right? You want to come across with your personality and your energy. If you don't do that, it can appear really artificial, disingenuous, and I'll show you a couple of examples of that. It can actually change, be inconsistent with its tone throughout, and it can fail to align. So I am just looking. Let me escape out of this, and I'm going to show you real quick an example of that. So here are two letters. The first one, I asked it to generate a hiring committee letter based just on the job description. The second one, I said to do it based on my background. And if you read these, you can see that it's very sameness, right? And this is a problem that a lot of the hiring people are facing, is it's a sea of sameness. You don't have like, oh, this person writes better than this person. You just have this very generic information. So you can see a personalized one is better than a generic one. But even so, are there words in here that I would not use? Very clearly, very clearly. I was thinking, I possess advanced knowledge. I would never say that, right? That is just not something that I would do. So I am looking at the time and realize I need to hurry. So let's go back to here. All right, so now we're just going to give you some ideas. So for home and hobbies, there are lots of entertaining ways to do this. You can actually use it to learn, right? Anything you want to learn, anything you're curious about, you can ask it to summarize articles. You can even ask your Alexa to connect you to ChatGPT so you can verbally ask your questions. You can help your kids with homework. Don't let them use ChatGPT to do their homework, but it can help them get unstuck. It can explain how things are done, and it can help them brainstorm. At Berkeley, we have a couple of interesting things that are coming out of this where they're using AI to personalize people's learning to help provide supports for any gaps in knowledge that they might have. They're also using AI to help the TAs answer repetitive questions more efficiently. There's some really great stuff coming out on that side and making learning more personal. You could do home design. You can mock up what your house and rooms could look like. I like a lot of those home improvement shows. They're a lot of fun to play with. You can find out what to cook for dinner. You can say, I have these ingredients, AI, give me a recipe. Or you can say, I have these guests coming over with these dietary requirements. What should I make? What are wines that pair well? You can look at it to help you with your finance, your financial literacy, your budgeting, learning your habits, learning how to reduce energy costs. You can use it even to get fit, right? So you can use it to scan your actual body and come up with personalized, affordable workouts. And I love this one. You can plan your next trip, or even if you don't have a trip, you can just plan a trip that you'd like to take. It will create itineraries. You can say, create an itinerary for a family with a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old who likes trains. Go. And you give it the location and you give it the length of your trip. It's a lot of fun to play around with. You can use it to create photos and paintings or write books or start a podcast or create a song. And I will do one caveat here about copyrights and artist IP. This is an unsolved problem. A lot of artists shared their work on Instagram, but didn't give permission to use their art to train these AI models. And yet they were used. And so I think a lot of this is still a bit fraught at this moment, and we'll have to see how artists are going to protect their IP. So returning to our work, whether you are at a desk or you're a deskless worker, there's a lot of opportunities for you to use AI. You can use it to create templates, answer questions, get basic information, create a draft, figure out a 5-month learning plan. What are the modules we should have? What is a job description? You can use it, as we said, to take notes. You can use it to create the slides and images. So if you have access to Adobe Suite through the University of California, you already have access to Adobe Firefly, which is their AI generating tool. AI is really good at translating, but caveat here, it's good at translating into English, but not from English into another language. And in fact, there was research done that showed medical advice when doctors wanted to give their patients information, but they didn't speak English. About 25% of the time, not only was the information wrong, it was medically dangerous. So there's something that we need to be really focusing on and addressing. You can draft proposals, you can get information put into different templates. But again, I wouldn't upload your grant proposal to the AI at this point, because then it would be used to train other models. But these services may not do that. And that would be something I would look at their terms on. You could even scan receipts. We all talked about not liking to do our expense reports. And it has really changed marketing dramatically, very dramatically. It's actually embedded in a lot of the tools. It can generate the copy, it can generate briefs, it can generate targeted marketing plans, and it's going to really radically change how marketing is done. You can create videos and teaser videos and training videos very quickly. You can, as we discussed, do coding. And chatbots are very simple, like it's basically automating the FAQs rather than looking through a long list of FAQs. You can let people natural language ask a question and it'll answer from the FAQs. Or you can go the next level out, which is to create an AI agent where it's actually using a RAG or a retrieval augmented generation. And I'll show you an example of that. This starts to get a little bit more technical. But there's an important thing to know about that is you don't have to always be technical. You just have to know what is possible. So generative AI does not have to just serve people inside the office. It can allow people outside the office to access repair manuals, to access information about their health plan. And so it's really important. And if you look at the bottom here, I have a Future of Work podcast, and I spoke with this woman, Muriel Clausen, and she brought up a lot of really amazing use cases for people who are not tethered to a desk. So next steps as you go forward are to major in being human. Actually, let me pause. I think I've got enough time. I'm going to pop over here and show you one little thing, because this is where I'm trying to do this. This is Citrus. This is our website. And if you wanted to find a researcher to collaborate with, you could search by name or research area or initiatives, but you couldn't say, hey, who else is working on carbon accounting? Enter a RAG. So this is a retrieval augmented generation, and it's a prototype. It's in progress. But here I asked, I would like to find someone to collaborate with on carbon accounting, and it searches through all of our people are researchers in Citrus, and it brings up these people and tells you why you'd want to talk to them. This person has explored the carbon dynamics associated with marginal lands. This person does carbon pricing and efficiency effects. So if I'm looking for somebody to collaborate on for research, that's a great way to go. So my point here is I found a student to do that. I didn't do it myself. I just had an idea that it wasn't that hard to do, and I was able to create that prototype. So let me leave you with these tips, and then we'll take the last few minutes for questions. Oh, I did it again, Lewis. Shame, shame.
From current slide.
Yes. All right, let's try this again. Dun, dun, dun. And we have to zoom down so we start at the current slide. Here we go. All right, here we go. Your next few steps. Major in being human. AI is not good at being imaginative. It's not good at being unpredictable. And it's certainly not good at empathy or being able to understand needs or where there are issues. That's your human in the loop. You have to think about ethics, and this is where I'll provide a bunch of documents for you if you want to learn more about this, but how do we address bias and mitigation, accountability, explainability, those copyright issues, deep fakes, climate impacts. And these are some of the books that you can look at. One of the very first ones I read was Invisible Women, and it was about how data is used to inform a lot of things, like the temperature of the building is based on the average temperature for a man in a suit. So women are often cold. So there's a lot of like built-in bias in data sets. And if we automate based on that, that's where the issues can arise. So here's a bunch of books I will share with you. Actually, if you go back here, go to bit.ly/using AI productively. And I've given you a list of all of these books and resources. You can now use this as a jumping off point. If you want to learn more, there's a lot of courses out there, and LinkedIn is a good place to start. This is our Dean of the College of Engineering, Sujay King Liu, and she is teaching a class here on responsible AI, principles and practical applications, and she looks at that in HR, social media, health, and climate. You can go to Berkeley Exec Ed. Berkeley Extension's courses are not available right now, but maybe they'll be available in the fall. There are lots of certification courses. And of course, there's all the additional resources on the campus. So let me stop there, and I will take any questions that people have, and then we'll hand it back to Lewis to wrap us up in a few minutes.
There's 2 questions in QA. If you click QA, Jill, there's 2 questions for you there.
Go ahead and read them to me. I'll bring it up, but I don't want to hold this up here.
Okay, there's one question. How do we incorporate AI while maintaining a high level of critical thinking?
By using AI, you have to maintain that critical thinking. You can't just take things at the face value. It's about also architecting your questions, as we call it, prompt engineering, but it's really asking better questions and then looking thoughtfully at that information. If it has to be factual, I would go to that perplexity.ai where you can get the footnotes. So I think it is about being thoughtful and intentional about the use.
And then there's a question about plagiarization with using AI.
Yes, so this is a big issue, and I don't think the answer is found yet. There used to be tools that could detect plagiarism. They are getting less good because AI is getting better. Also, there's some evidence that it's biased against people with different learning and speaking styles. They might be perceived as being automated when in fact that's, just a different learning style. What is happening here at Berkeley is a number of things, but one of the impacts is that people are doing more in-person classes, more in-person tests, more in-person papers, because they don't want to have just outside generated information. So they really want to have the students learn this. And so being able to give them practice tests, but then when they come in, they have to do it on their own. Detecting plagiarism for, books that are famous is easy. Detecting plagiarism with, the infinite number of theses that are out there, much harder.
There's someone who has been told that their written communication sounds AI generated. How do they get away from that?
Yeah, this is building empathy and saying, other people have different writing styles. And I'll try to find that research and add it to the bit.ly/using AI productively sheet. I'll look for some articles on that and also approaches, but I think also being clear and transparent and talking to people about your concerns, I think would be important.
And final question, how will we know when artificial intelligence is sentient?
When will we reach the singularity? I think we're a very, very long way away from that. I don't know what the technical tipping point would be. There's a lot of these tests to see if you can tell if it's AI or a machine. I actually took a survey where they were seeing if I could detect if the picture that I was seeing was AI or not AI, and I actually did pretty well comparatively. I think I got 70% correct. But all of those things that I saw are going to be now used to improve the outcome. So if I'm like, well, the neck didn't match the face, or the ears didn't quite match, or these things, we're at a very point of very fast change. And so I don't think we're going to hit the singularity, but we are going to see that massively improved AI and generative AI over time.